Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 13 in the How to Create a 2D Platformer course. In today's video we're gonna make some cool effects whenever our character respawns. Also, I'm really sorry that I didn't upload a video last weekend, but I attended DreamHack, which if you don't know is this huge digital festival in Sweden. It's really awesome, and while I was there I also made a game with a good friend of mine, which I hope to soon finish up so I can upload the full source code and all the assets, and maybe even make a video about it, and that's my phone going out there. But until then, what we're going to be doing today is, of course, effects. That means audio and a particle system. Also, I will shortly tease that in the next platformer video, we'll be doing enemies. I just quickly drew this in Photoshop, and we're going to make him move around in the next one. Cool. So as always, I've opened up Unity. And what we're going to do here is we are going to first off make a particle prefab that we can instantiate whenever our player respawns. So right now when we have it set up with a GM object that hosts a game master script, and if we open this up in MonoDevelop, you will see that we've put some debug.log statements in here saying that we should add a waiting for spawn sound and a spawn a particle prefab. So actually all we need to do is add an instantiate statement in here. So that's what we're going to do. So first off, let's create a variable where we can put in our particle prefab. So let's write public transform, and let's do spawn prefab. And then down here, all we want to write right above the debug.log statement is instantiate to spawn something. And that takes in 3 arguments. First, the object, which is going to be our spawn prefab. Next up, a position, which is just going to be spawn point dot position. Remember, we did all of this is in the last tutorial. And then a rotation, and for that we can do spawn point dot rotation, or maybe just quaternion dot identity, which is just going to be 0, 0, 0. But I'm going to do spawn point dot rotation, so we have the ability to rotate the spawn point and therefore also rotate the particles. So now we can just remove our debug.log statement, hit save, and head back into Unity. And you will see that we now have a variable that is currently empty that should be populated with a prefab. So now we can go up under game object and hit particle system to create a new particle system. Let's reset the transform here so it's 0, 0, 0, and also in the rotation 0, 0, 0. And if you disable 2D mode, you will notice that this particle system is 3-dimensional. But it should work just fine with our 2-dimensional assets. So what we can do with this is first off maybe change the shape of emission, because right now it's a cone pointing inwards, and that doesn't make too much sense because we're making a 2D game. So let's go under shape, and instead of the cone shape, let's just do, we could do a sphere, which would work just fine. But I like, whenever doing 2D games, to make a hemisphere and then make sure it points out towards the camera. I just think that that makes logically more sense than a sphere, because then it can be trickier to comprehend when our particles going inwards and outwards and all that. So what we're going to do with this particle system in order to rotate it is not to just rotate it on the X or the Y 180 degrees. This will work in the scene, but remember, whenever we are then instantiating the prefab, what will happen is we set a certain rotation, which is often just going to be 0, 0, 0. So what we are going to do instead is we are going to make an empty game object and put this under the empty game object, and then make the empty game object into the prefab, and therefore we can rotate this just the way we want to. So if that sounds complicated, it's really not. All we're going to do is hit Ctrl-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N if you're on a Mac. Then rename this to, let's do spawn particles. And then we can drag the particle system onto there. Then let's reset the transform of the spawn particles, and then again reset the transform of our particle system. And now we can rotate our particle system 180 degrees on the Y or the X. And what you will notice is that when we now select the spawn particles, they are still 0, 0, 0. And that's because our particle system's rotation is relative to its parent. So that's really awesome. So we can basically move this around and rotate it just the way we want to, and it will make sure that this rotation and this transform is relative to its parent. Cool. So now we can go ahead and actually make this do something. So first off, let's just move this hemisphere in. So just changing the radius to something like 0.2, or actually I'm going to do 1. I just want this to be a very small dot. Then we can move it up a bit so we can see it a bit better, like this. And yeah, that looks pretty cool. You will notice that right now our emission is like continuous. It's instantiating a certain amount of particles each frame, and that is defined by the emission rate. What I want to do instead is set that to 0 and then define a burst. So let's just hit the plus sign here, and you will see that our particle system now makes one single burst and then it just loops that. So, but right now each burst has a duration of 5 and a lifetime of 5. So if we decrease the lifetime to something like 2, you will see that the particles only live for 2 seconds. And then we might as well make the duration 2 so it loops as soon as the particles die. Something like this. Right now it's also spreading out quite a lot, but I like the fact that it has this explosion feel to it. So what we can go ahead and do is simply bump down or leave the speed as is, but then change the force over or the velocity over lifetime. But I don't want it to be affected in a certain direction. I just want it to be damped down a bit. So I want to select the limit velocity over lifetime. So turn that on, and you can see right now what it does. But currently it's set to a fixed amount. The speed is just set to 1. So what we can do is we can head over to the arrow on the right hand side here, and we can select curve. And this allows us down here to adjust the curve of the speed of the particle system over time. So I'm just going to select one of the prefabs down here. You can also always right click to add a key and then just shape this just the way you want it to. But instead, I'm just going to select the one that increases over time, or I'm sorry, decreases over time, because this is speed. And you can see that it slows down as time goes. But right now this effect is quite a bit too much. So let's change the dampen amount down. Something like maybe 0.3. That's a bit too small, too much still. So let's do maybe 0.2 or maybe even 0.1. Actually, I like 0.1 quite a bit. And we can also bump up the start speed to make it even more explosive, like something like 8. And I think that looks pretty cool actually. What I will also go ahead and do is give it just a tiny bit of gravity. We are in space, but we are at pretty low gravity. So I'm just going to change the gravity multiplier here and just give it a tiny bit, something like 0.15, just so it drops down a bit, maybe even 0.2. I think that looks pretty cool. Next up, you can see that at this stage, the particles just disappear and then it loops. That's not particularly pretty. So what we can do instead is we can make them fade out. So in order to do this, enable the color by or color over lifetime, and then we can expand this, and you can see that it gives us a color, but this is actually not a color. This is a gradient. And what this gradient editor allows us to do is, first off, we can change the color that our particle system has as time goes. So we can maybe select the key down here at the bottom and make that black. And you can see that now it fades from white to black as time goes. But I actually don't want to affect the color. Instead, I want to affect the alpha, and that's the keys up here. So if we just select the alpha key over to the right and then change the alpha to 0, you can see that it starts fading out as soon as they appear. That's maybe a bit too extreme, so let's add in another key here just by pressing, and then let's bump that alpha up to the maximum value so that we only have this slight fade out at the end. I think that looks pretty cool. What we can also do is shrink or grow these particles over lifetime. So simply enable size over lifetime and you will have another curve down here that you can adjust. Let's try shrinking them a bit. That looks pretty cool. We can also try growing them. That's also a pretty fun effect. Smoke, for example, often grows, while something like sparks will often just shrink. I'm just going to shrink these, but not too much. That looks pretty cool. Next up, we can adjust the amount of particles, and that's done under the emission tab right here. Instead of 30, let's maybe do 50. So we have this plenty amount of particles. You will notice that right now these particles always emit in this beautiful, evenly distributed shape. But instead, we can go under shape and check random direction, and this will just give us a bit more randomness. What we can also do under the speed and lifetime parameters, and you can do this with basically all parameters, is we can make it a tiny bit random just how quickly these spread. So let's do the start speed, for example. Let's click the tiny arrow to change the start speed, and let's, instead of a constant, choose random between two constants. So now we can see that it's set between 0 and 8. Let's just do maybe 6 and 9. And you can see now that it has this more random feel to it. We can add to it with the lifetime also. So let's again do random between two constants. And let's do 0.7, whoops, 1.7, and 2.3. You can see that they don't all fade out at the same time, which looks just a bit cooler. Let's do the same thing with the start size, random between two constants. And let's maybe do 0.7 and 1.3. So now they also have different sizes. Cool. So that's just the basics of making such particle system. Next up, let's change the color a bit. So I'll just quickly check how long we've been running here. Yeah, we are coming up on quite some time already. So let's move on a bit quickly here. So in order to change the color, we could just adjust the start color here, and you can change it to whatever color you would like. But we can also change its material properties and even give it a texture. Right now it just has this dot texture, which comes with the default particle. But let's go ahead and create a custom material. So go under create and then material. Let's call this particle glow. And then let's change the shader to particles additive. And again, change it to one of these particle textures. You can import some of them under the standard assets. I've already imported the particles. I think we used them earlier. But again, go under import package and then the particles, and it will give you a lot of starting presets. You can also, of course, make your own or search for them on Google. There are lots and lots of free to use particle presets or textures, I should say. Cool, so let's find our material. Where did it go? The material. Am I blind? I'm pretty sure I made it just here. Particle glow there, okay. So what we can do here is we can change the texture to maybe color flare. Let's try that. And then let's choose the particle system and now drag in the particle glow. And you can see that they change their layout. This is pretty sparkly, maybe a tiny bit too much. We can try with another one, maybe even the star one. Wow, that's pretty extreme. We also have this steam blur. I actually might just go with the default particle, but then play around with the tint color here to make it look a more like fire, or we can do a crazy color like purple. And I'm going through this pretty quickly because I just want to demonstrate the basic concepts, but you should really just give yourself some time and play around with this, because you're going to be needing it in a lot of different projects, and it's really something that's good to know in and out, so you can create these awesome graphics. So I'm just going to go with this very washed out glowy feel. And now that we've made this prefab, make sure to select the particle system and turn off looping. Looping is definitely not something you want whenever we're instantiating in particle system like this. So now we can drag this onto the project panel to make a prefab, and we can delete it from our scene. Then we can select our GM object and then drag in the spawn particles to the spawn prefab variable. And now you can see that we filled it out, hit apply on our GM object. And when we hit play now and jump down and wait, we can see that our particles are spawning, though they aren't spawning in the right location. So let's see what's going on here. So we have our spawn point, and let's change to the default navigator here. And it's set right here. Let's try and drop our spawn particles into the scene, and let's try and drop them onto the spawn point and set their position to the spawn points. We can see that they are actually up here. So that's because we've moved our particle system. So let's just delete that. Nested prefabs are never a good idea. Make sure not to nest your prefabs. It will just hurt you in the end. So let's just drag the spawn particles inside of the scene here, and then select the particle system, and you can see that our transform is all kinds of wrong. So simply reset that. We can go into the scene and remove 2D view. I just want this to be facing the camera, so let's rotate this 180 degrees, and now it's much better. So it was simply a problem with our prefabs being offset. So now let's hit apply. And that's the really cool way of doing it this way is if you have some kind of offset, or if you want to make it offset for some reason, you have full control over how it's positioned. So now let's delete that again after hitting apply, and we can hit play. And when we jump down and wait for it to respawn, you can see the particles spawning and then fading out, and that's basically it. You will notice though, and this is not always an issue, but it might be if you're making a larger game, or if you're spawning lots of particles a second, like we did with our bullet trail, is that our spawn particles currently just stay in the scene. You can't see them because the particles have faded out and currently have an alpha of 0, but they are in our hierarchy. So let's get rid of them. So inside of mono develop, what we want to do is we want to store a temporary reference to our spawn particles prefab. So in order to do this, we simply type game object, and it's standard naming convention in the Unity forums to just call a short reference like this a clone, because we are basically making a clone of our prefab. So I'm just going to do that. You could also just call this maybe spawn particles, or spawn particles with non-capital letters, of course, or just SS, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to name these clone. And then we want to cast this to make sure that we get it as a game object. So simply type as a game object at the end. And then we can do destroy and simply put in our clone. And then maybe an offset time of, let's do 3 seconds. So should we change the prefabs so it fades out longer or anything like that, we have this error margin. So now it will destroy after 3 seconds. Cool. Next up, we are quickly going to add a respawn sound, and that's going to be it for this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to head in to our 2D assets pack, which can be downloaded from Brackeys.com. Also, if you have any questions, please head over to forum.brackeys.com where you can get your questions answered. But again, Brackeys.com, you can see the 2D platformer course right here. Simply click on that and click on download 2D assets, and they will be downloaded. And everything inside of this pack, or almost everything, is free. If not, it's listed inside of the README here. But this that I'm going to be showing you now is definitely free. And then go under audio, and you can hear that I've added a respawn countdown. So let's just have a quick listen to that.
Respawning 3, 2, 1.
Cool. So now let's drag the respawn countdown into the Unity scene. There. And we can see it appearing here. And I've made sure to cut this off so it begins
Respawning 3.
Whoa, that was loud. And ends right after. Just turning the volume a bit down here. Cool. Let's change this from a 3D sound to a 2D, so disable 3D sound. You could also force this to mono. Don't recommend it. I've made it as a stereo sound on purpose. And let's just do the native WAV. Now let's hit apply. And this is going to be just fine. If you want to be really good with your sounds, you should look up the differences between load into memory and stream from disk. I've covered it in other tutorials, so I'm just going to ignore it for now. There's plenty of documentation on all that, and all of the audio system is basically going to be changing in Unity 5 anyway, which is awesome. So, okay, let's add this onto our GM object. Just drag it on there, and it's going to add an audio source with the respawn countdown. And let's just uncheck play on awake. Actually, I changed my mind. Even easier than this. No, let's do this. Yeah, okay. I know what to do. So uncheck play on awake and make sure that it's not looping. Then let's put the volume at something like 0.5 so it's not going to blast us away. And what we want to do here is we want to trigger this sound from playing whenever the respawn countdown begins. So if we open up monodevelop, you can see that we have this debug.log statement right before we wait the spawn delay amount of seconds. So let's just have a look at how long our clip is. It's currently, I bet that's about 4 seconds. So let's set the respawn delay to 4 seconds inside of Unity, just to begin with, and we can always adjust it later. And then what we want to do is, instead of this debug.log statement, we simply want to say audio.play. And we can be explicit here, but let's just leave the parameter. Let's not give it an argument, and it will play the audio source right here. So when we now hit play and jump down,
respawning 3, 2, 1.
And you can see that it counts down and then spawns us. I'm just going to turn up the volume here so you have a better chance of hearing it through the microphone. And then I'm also going to tune the spawn delay. That was just a bit too long. So let's try 3.5 instead, maybe. Oh, I noticed that our spawn delay has been set as an integer. Let's change that to a float because it's just annoying. And I think that wait 4 seconds will take a float. Anything else would be weird. Yeah, that's all we needed to do. So let's try 3.5 now. And let's hit play. And jump down.
Respawning 3, 2, 1.
And that was actually perfect. So a spawn delay of 3.5 should work. And it sounds awesome with the sound. And we have the effect. Whew. Made it all into one video. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, next time we're going to be taking a look at making some enemies, which is going to be great. great. I'm looking forward to it. It's probably the most requested topic, and yes, I am going to cover it next time. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.